I want to kick off with obviously this past WrestleMania weekend, spring break. You're in the match with Blue Pain, and the injury happens. Start with the positives. This happens. I mean, what is when it happens going through in your mind? Do you know how bad it is? What's the kind of process of you figuring out, what's happened?
So I think there's some confusion because I've been reading online that I got hurt in that match. It wasn't that match. It was the next
Okay.
weekend, actually. Yeah, yeah. So I wrestled. Hey, you saw Matt Cardona against Blue Pain. It was sports entertainment. I mean, Blue Pain. He pushed Jimmy Lloyd off the stage in a wheelchair. There was a Zack Ryder running. There was an urn with with blue powder inside. There was a fireball. It was everything you would expect from Matt Cardona versus Blue Pain. I don't want to say Kane. I
Yeah.
don't want to get anybody trouble here. Blue Pain. It was a spectacle.
Yeah.
It was wild. It was sports entertainment in GCW. I actually got hurt the next week. It was
Right.
the next week. And to answer your question, it was in the match. I was clotheslining someone over the top rope, and something I've done how many times in my career? I don't even know. So many times. And I just felt that pop in my chest. I've never strained my chest before, never injured my chest before, but I knew I just tore my pec. I could feel it instantly. Obviously, I was hoping that wasn't the case, but I got an MRI a couple of days later, and then sure enough, there it is: torn pec, needs surgery, out for 6 to 8 months. So there's no good time to get injured in pro wrestling, but that was certainly not a good time.
And obviously, you are a total hustler in terms of your career and what you do. So I assume at that point your summer's pretty much fully booked. Like you've got things for months and months and months. So what's the process after that of kind of figuring out, what you're going to do and how you're going to edit, I guess, some of those bookings?
Yeah, like you said, my summer was completely already booked. So I contacted all the promoters. The first 2 days after surgery was just, I had my computer in front of me, my cell phone, my calendar, my email. I was just going through my whole schedule because I do this all myself. I'm my own agent. I do all the emails, I do all the communicating with the promoters. So I hit them all up. I explained, hey, I can't wrestle. I can still come in. I'll give you a little discount on the rate. Obviously, you're not gonna pay me full price to just talk. And a lot of people decided to bring me in because they know the value that I have. And some promotions decided, hey, let's wait until you're 100%, which I totally understand. So then I had to go and find other bookings, and I almost overbooked myself in the process because my June is the busiest I've been since getting released from WWE. And maybe I wish I, maybe I wish I didn't book myself that much, but I was in such a panic to stay out there because this wasn't going to be a vacation in wrestling, especially independent wrestling. It's so hard to gain momentum. Luckily, well, not luckily, I worked my ass off for it, but I had the momentum and I wasn't going to let it die. I was not going to let it die.
And I guess it kind of speaks to what you've been able to build over the last 3 years. That a lot of those, a bunch of those bookings have kept you on. GCW giving you the role, all this stuff that you're still going to be able to do while you're out, is a kind of testament to what you've built.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I mean, people I don't think come to a wrestling show to see Matt Cardona actually wrestle. They come to this to meet me beforehand at the meet and greet. They come to see the entrance, the trash talk, just to interact. The wrestling, sure, it's a bonus, right? So I think if you don't get Matt Cardona actually wrestling on your card, like you didn't miss out on the Matt Cardona experience, because the Matt Cardona experience is the promo, the entrance, the all the cool merch at the meet and greet, the interaction at the meet and greet. And yeah, obviously, of course, I want to be wrestling, but since I'm not, I'm able to do all these other things. I have all these, tools in my toolbox. It's not like there are so many other wrestlers who, if they got hurt, they'd have to sit home and not do anything.
Yeah, for sure. I want to kind of go back a little bit to 2020 when WWE released you. COVID's just happened. You've said it's kind of the best thing that ever happened to you, given what you've been able to do. But when that initially happened, and there's not indies there every weekend to just go and work at, how did you kind of deal with that initially and kind of go forward?
Yes, like you said, there was no indies. That's when I tried AEW, which did not work out for me at the time. And I think I had two matches in AEW.
Yeah.
So I was only there for a cup of coffee. I thought the contract was coming. It didn't come. Why? I'm not quite sure. I thought I delivered on the shows. My merch was the #1 shirt of the week. And at the time I was devastated that I did not get offered a contract. I absolutely was, because like you said, there was nowhere really else to go and kind of build my name. I'm sure I could have found an independent that was running with social distancing and the mat. That's not what I wanted to do. So I wanted to wait until the world opened back up. But yeah, when AEW didn't work out for me at the time, I was absolutely devastated. Looking back, blessing in disguise. But it wasn't until like the world opened up like the following year where I was like just dipping my toe in the independent scene, so to speak. And I knew I needed to change. I knew, I can't just be Zack Ryder called Matt Cardona. Like that sucked. I knew that. But at the same time, you can't just, change your character overnight on the indies, especially if you've been on television for over a decade, like I was. So I had to find something organic and natural to cause the character change, and that's when GCW comes into play, and that's when everything really changes.
Yeah, because obviously, the first half of 2021, you're doing stuff with Impact and you're kind of figuring stuff out. But talk about how did the Nick Gage thing come about? What was the kind of impetus for, such a massive change and that would pay off, obviously, big time?
Yeah, so listen, I owe Impact so much for giving me an opportunity. It helped me out in the sense that I helped it helped me get my confidence back. Not that I necessarily lost confidence, but it just helped me gain even more confidence. Especially after that failed AEW run. I was kind of questioning, like, do I have what it takes anymore? And Impact gave me that opportunity. Also, just Impact also helped like stupid things, silly things like, if I'm doing a backstage interview or backstage pre-tape, like in WWE land, for someone like me, I better stick to that script pretty much word for word. But at Impact, that was my first time really getting some freedom to kind of just, of course, there's an outline, of course, there's a script, but I don't have to say it word for word. And once that happened, it really, got me more comfortable on the microphone, especially, when it came to like backstage stuff or in ring stuff. And I was never signed to Impact. I was just there on a handshake deal. And I was able to keep doing other indies, and I was having a good time. I had the major wrestling for your podcast. I was having a lot of fun, which I really needed at that point in my career. And then I was approached to do this death match with Nick Gage in GCW, and my initial reaction was absolutely not. Like Nick Gage, he was just on Dark Side of the Ring at that time. He was a criminal. He's a drug addict. He almost killed David Arquette in the ring. I said, no way. This is not what I want to do. But then I took a step back and I realized people would be talking about it and it would create buzz. And I'm so grateful and so glad that I changed my mind and did it, because that match created so much buzz that it changed my career, changed my life, it changed GCW. I think it changed independent wrestling.
I mean, there's so many things that kind of came out of that for you. There's the dressing as Vince as ECW champion, the spinner bit, all this stuff that like came out of it. Did all that stuff for you come quite easy once you'd kind of committed to this new character, or was that something that kind of took some time and took some work for you to adapt to?
It was so easy because I wanted to turn heel in WWE for so long. I had all this frustration, this natural frustration built up inside me. But like you can't just turn heel in WWE if it's you're not the booker, man. You know what I'm saying? You don't have the pencil.
Yeah.
So I just knew I had all these ideas like kind of in my back pocket. And not saying I had handcuffs in WWE, not saying that at all, but once I was free, once I was on the independents, there was no handcuffs at all. And I could do absolutely anything and everything was in my control. And I could try and I could succeed, I could try and I could fail, but at least I was able to try. And all I ever wanted was the opportunity to try things.
And you also mentioned the Major Wrestling Figure podcast, and that's something that as a fellow Hasbro collector, I appreciate you when you started that, when you guys started it. But I
Yeah.
mean, it spawned so much, the action figure line, the live shows, all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you guys started out, did you have those big grand goals for it, or did that kind of come naturally?
Quite the opposite. Like it was pulling teeth to get Brian Myers to do this damn show, like pulling teeth. Finally, I think I just annoyed him so damn much. He's like, all right, I'll do it. 45 minutes a week, and like if you listen to the first episode, I think it's like 45 minutes, maybe less. And we say, like, hey, we're not going to have merch. We're not going to have different social media, but it kind of blew up, where we never started it to make money. We started it to have fun, to have a hobby, to have a creative outlet. And like you said, it led to something that makes us a lot of money. We have this dedicated fan base. We have a YouTube channel. We have, we put on live shows. We have our own toy line. The stuff that we've done in these past, it's almost been 6 years of this podcast, which is pretty incredible. August will be 6 years, and I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. And it's just so wild to me that I'm talking like a legitimate business, like an LLC, like a real business, is the Major Wrestling podcast. And then Major Bendy's is its own business. So like two businesses, legit businesses that bring me a lot of money. It's just started off something, that was a hobby that I was begging Brian Myers to do.
Yeah, I mean it's great to see. And one of the things that I think you said earlier this year is when one of the rounds of WWE releases happened, and you talked about there is money to be made out there if you're willing to sort of go for it. It always feels like when there is a release or a set of releases that you're someone who know what that feels like. You've been in that position and you
Yeah.
want to kind of help. Is that something that you kind of feel when you see that stuff happening, that like you want to kind of give some like a pep to people who might not feel great at that point?
It's scary. It's scary. I was in WWE for, almost 15 years, and I was like the absolute diehard wrestling fan. I thought I knew what was going on outside WWE, but when I got released, I realized I really had no idea. Like but like you don't know how to like, negotiate a book. You know that things are out there, but once like you're in the driver's seat and it's kind of like sink or swim. Um, and even like you said, like there was no wrestling the first year. So it was like really intimidating because like it's like, well, what am I gonna do like for money right now? Like AEW didn't want me, right? There's no indies. Luckily we had the podcast, and then luckily I started with Impact. But once that indie world opened up, um, I gotta credit Brian Myers. He kind of got my foot wet on a couple of the deals. And then I realized, like, you know what, like I want to be handling all this. I have a different vision for myself. And I think I've, at least, changed the game, because back in the day, if you got released from WWE and you went to the independents, your career 9 times out of 10, you went to go die. That was it. And then, I saw what Drew McIntyre did and what Cody did, and I stole from their formulas and I created my own. And hopefully someone steals from all three of us and gets even more successful. But I've said many times, this isn't my like pass the torch run. This is my light a new one for myself run. But if I can help people out along the way, like, so be it. I'm not trying to make sure nobody else succeeds. I'm not trying to keep all this knowledge. And last night I just did a seminar, my first ever seminar, but I didn't teach people how to do hammerlocks. I taught people how to make money.
One of the things that you said I'd never really thought about, and it was really interesting to me, was it's not just about creating buzz, it's about keeping the buzz going once
Right.
you've created it. Can you give like an example of that, of how you do that? Because when I heard it, it was just so fascinating to kind of hear that said out loud.
Well, I think this business is very like, what have you done for me lately? You know what I'm saying? And like, I think so many people are, especially when they get released from WWE, I couldn't be like, oh, I was a former tag team champion, former IC. Who cares? Like, what did you do for me yesterday? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you go to my, it's a dumb example, but it's also a great example. You go to my 8x10s, my gimmick table, all my stuff. Yes, I will have one Zack Ryder 8x10 out there, but everything else, every other piece of merch is Matt Cardona stuff. Zack Ryder's dead. Like, I'm very grateful for that run, but it's over. You know what I'm saying? I'm someone who wants to keep moving forward. My career is not over. Hey, in 20 years, sure, maybe I'll have all the old school stuff out. But right now, I'm looking towards the future. I just turned 39, but I feel like I'm in the not even hit the prime of my career. But to answer your question, like, how do I capitalize on things? A lot of it is just gut instinct, and it's not this calculated plan. For instance, with that initial death match with Nick Gage, I've told this story before. I wore a white T-shirt because I knew I'd get some blood on it, a couple of trickles of blood. But because of how violent that match was, that shirt was maroon, and I'm like, there's something to this. Like, I can't just like put this on. First of all, I can't just throw this away. No way, this is historic. At least to me, and I can't just, you know, I can't sell like a bloody shirt on like eBay. That's weird, right? So since I'm a diehard fan, I remembered like those WrestleMania plaques that they make, that WWE makes, where it's the ring canvas, a nice side 8x10 and a nice plaque. And that's what I did. I tracked down that company, the exact company, and I sent them my bloody t-shirt. I told them what it was. I told them to wear gloves, and they cut up my bloody shirt like it was a ring canvas, a nice print of me with the title, made these plaques, limited edition. I made over $20,000 off this shirt, and then plus all these toy companies have made toys based on this match. So just one match that, like, at the end of the day, it was an independent show in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Not only, like, let's pretend it didn't change my career in life, which it did. It made me like over $30,000 on just merchandise that I was able to make from that match afterwards. Now that's an exception, right? That's an extreme exception, but there's always ways to capitalize on things. Even like an indie show that I do on a Saturday, like, to me, that show, and to me, the show's not dead yet. I have a whole week to use content from that show to give myself content.
Yeah.
I think people don't want to promote the shows that they're going to, which I don't understand. I think they think, well, it's not my job to promote this show. Well, if you think about it like that, it's so short-sighted. You're promoting yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because if you get more asses in those seats, guess what? They're going to come to your table and buy your stuff. That you got to think like that, or it's more people out there who are going to take pictures of you that you can use for social media next week. Like, I think so deep when people think on such a surface level. But then after those shows, you use those shows to promote yourself all the next week. And so it's just like this constant flow of content, to me, seems like a no-brainer, but it seems so impossible for some people. I just don't get it.
And then you've got the longest lines at your gimmick table and your merch table, so it's worth
it. And the highest prices. I go around to these conventions, I see what everyone else is doing, and I go higher than them. Well, it depends. I'm not going higher than Sting, but it's all situational.
I do.
That's good. That's gonna be the headline. Matt Cardona charges more than Sting. Hey, that was actually a rumor. I don't think I've ever said this publicly. That was actually a rumor why I didn't get hired in AEW.
Really?
Is because apparently, first of all, this is not true. This is 100%. Now, I'm not sure if this was said, but this definitely didn't come out of my goddamn mouth. I heard one of the reasons I wasn't signed to AEW is because I was asking for Sting money. That's the rumor I've heard, which is so ridiculous. It's such a ridiculous thing that I have to laugh about it.
That's amazing.
We never even talked money. So we didn't even talk money.
That's an amazing story. Well, speaking of AEW, you ended up making the appearance this year in the Cope Open with Adam Copeland on Collision. And it was, even in commentary, they kind of made allusions to when you came in 2020 and you hadn't fully formed the character you are now and you came back. How did that come about, and what was it like getting to be there again, but this time fully realized?
That was my dream match for shoot. Even before I got in the business, Edge, Adam Copeland, one of my favorites of all time. That was my dream match, me versus Adam Copeland. And, when I was in WWE as Zack Ryder and one of his Edge heads, I thought for sure, oh my God, it's going to be Edge versus Hawkins versus Ryder eventually. Never happens. I become the woo-woo-woo guy. I guess it's still on the table, Zack Ryder versus Edge. He retires. So I'm like, oh my God, like, this dream match is never happening. He comes back to WWE. I get fired. Shit, this dream match is never happening. But once he goes to AEW, I'm like, it's still on the table. Because AEW, with the forbidden door, anybody can come in and out. And a few months ago, he was doing his Cope Open. And I shot him a text. I shot my shot. I don't know if this has been said publicly, but I said, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, something like, gotta shoot my shot here. I know you got the Cope Open. This is my dream match. I really appreciate if you'd consider me as a challenger. And he was really cool about it. Basically said, like, they were finishing up the Cope Open, but if it ever happened again, he'd keep me in mind. I wrote it off in my mind. Like, I thought, all right, well, a couple of months went by. All of a sudden he brings it back, and he brings it back with me. He called me on a Wednesday and said, hey, can you be at Collision Saturday? I'm like, well, I got to cancel the convention I'm on, but yeah, somehow, some way I'll be there. So I went to the convention for one day, and I made it. I got there and I had the dream match, and it was what a special night for me on so many levels. And it's a match I never watched back because like it just felt so special in that moment, and I wouldn't want to watch it back and start critiquing things I did, to ruin the night. But just getting holy shit chance on my entrance, it was like, you know what? Like what I've been doing is working, and it's a night I desperately needed. To see all the social media response. I think I did good numbers on the show. And and to have Adam afterwards, put it over to me and on social media. What a great night. And I'm so fortunate, so glad I was able to get that night. But I'll tell you what, I'd love a rematch. I'd love to beat Adam Copeland.
I did want to mention because obviously, your history with him as an edge head, etc., and you were involved in that WrestleMania 24 main event with Undertaker. Do you, at this point, you've moved on so much in your career, but do you still look back on that fondly, being involved in a WrestleMania main event the way that you were? Is it still a good memory for you, or are you kind of now focused on making new ones? How do you feel about it now when you look back?
Listen, I'm certainly focused on making new ones, but at the same time, of course, I'm grateful for things that I, got to experience. And, if it wasn't for Edge giving Hawkins and I the green light, you might not be talking to me today. We were the Major Brothers doing nothing on the main roster, and we had the idea to be the Edge heads. We pitched it, but like Edge didn't need us. We needed him. He didn't need two green kids, but he was so smart and he knew that this could work and that he could get real heat having two guys dressed as him under the ring, and then later on helping him win titles, retain titles. So he took a chance on us, and it helped us in so many ways. We got to wrestle guys like Batista, Rey Mysterio, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. It was such a learning experience. Even like, on these live events, these house shows, let's say it's Edge or Undertaker, and we're ringside, like best seats in the house. The ultimate way to learn, is sitting there, right like under their noses. And it was such a learning experience. It's such a great time in my career.
And one other WWE thing I wanted to ask you about from the past, because it always kind of tickled me, was Survivor Series 2011 when Rock goes out to do that promo and
Yeah.
fans are chanting, "We want Ryder." I mean, how I'm sure you've told this story before, but when are you still there? Do you hear it? Do you, someone tell you it happened? How are you hearing that, people are chanting that during Rock's promo?
So that day, that whole day, like this was like the peak of Z True Long Island Story and everything I was doing with the YouTube. It was like the real peak where like they started using me on TV a little bit, but not quite, where the fans were just like, can we have this fucking guy already? Where and now we're in New York City, my backyard. And I'll never forget, not the show hasn't even started yet, and they're chanting, "We want Ryder." And like I was like, and at the time, I'm not advertised to be there. I find out that day that I'm actually doing a run-in during the Ziggler Morrison match. I'm not supposed to be there. I have no idea that they're going to use me. And luckily they did a run-in where I come out and I lay out Ziggler. The entire Madison Square Garden does the fist pump with me and the woo woo woo. And that's the opening match. And then what, 3 hours later, while The Rock is in the ring, they're chanting for me. I was there and I was ready to go out if someone gave me the green light. In retrospect, I wish I would have just walked, what I'm saying? But I did not. That would have been a cool moment. But yeah, I was there, and it was very, very special. I mean, The Rock, the like arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time, comes back to WWE and they're chanting for me in Madison Square Garden. It was pretty cool.
It feels like throughout your career, it's kind of been a thing of, even if you're not being, pushed as much as you would like to, or being featured as much as you would like to, the fans have always kind of had your back once you got going.
Yeah, and I give him credit because it's hard. It's hard to root for the underdog if he eventually doesn't get it, if he eventually doesn't win it. You know what I'm saying? So they were so behind me on that YouTube show because I felt like I opened up to them, to the whole world, and said, "Hey guys, I need your help. I need to get noticed. I need to get on TV." And they helped me out. They chanted my shows, shared my name at shows I wasn't even at. They bought my merchandise, and I wasn't even featured on TV. So I'm so grateful for them. But even like, when times were tough and I was just kind of there, every time I got an opportunity, anytime WWE threw me a bone, the fans were right. back there with me. You know, WrestleMania when I win that IC title, they're there. They're going nuts. You know, they might have forgot about me for a couple years, but once they saw, like, oh my god, this guy might actually do it, they were super behind it and super behind the win. Yeah, so I'd be nothing without the fans.
And you said a lot. Zack Ryder's dead. If you do go back to WWE, many people are expecting you will at some point. How set in your mind is it that you are Matt Cardona? Because it seems very odd the idea that they would even want you to go back as Zack Ryder now because he just feels so far in the past.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I am so grateful for Zack Ryder. It set me up for this whole independent Matt Cardona run, but it is the past. You know, maybe this isn't the best analogy, but Scott Hall didn't go back as Razor Ramon. You know what I'm saying? Like, we still knew it was him. You know, like, I listen, it's 2024. Everyone knows I'm Zack Ryder. But if I were to go back, I feel like it has to be Matt Cardona. That's the value, right? Zack Ryder is a part of that story. Hey, you can still make Zack Ryder figures, still make the trading cards, still put me in the game, still get me some royalty checks as Zack Ryder. But the days of Zack Ryder and the woo woo woo, they're dead.
And this is just not that I think this is going through your mind. I'm just curious. You've been in WWE. You were under Vince when he was in charge. Now Triple H is in charge in creative. Are you looking at the show sometimes going, I wonder if I went back if creative would be different this time? Is that something that is in your mind of kind of a different regime?
Hey, the new regime has been fantastic. I mean, just look at the shows, just look at the numbers, right? WWE is clicking on all cylinders. Um, like, listen, I would go back. I don't care who's in charge. It doesn't matter to me as long as I'm on the show. You know, and that's another thing. Like, I don't want to go back just to go back. I don't want to go back just to be a guy on the roster. And there's nothing against people who are just guys on the roster, but I already did that. You know, been there, done that, and that's not what I want to do at this point in my career. I am having the most success I've ever had in my career in these past 4 years, and I've said this before. Whether you define success by accolades, money, happiness, I don't care. However you define it, this is the most successful time in my career. But I don't want to end my career wrestling, you know, in high school gyms or, you know, changing in alleys. I want a WrestleMania moment, or I want Madison Square Garden, or, you know, like AEW, All In, Wembley Stadium, stuff like that. Even just walking down that aisle on Collision, I felt like I belonged there. It felt so like, just so, even though I haven't had a quote unquote TV match in years, I just went right back into that, you know, like posing to the hard cam, you know, like it just, you know, it's just a skill that I never forgot and a skill that I missed.
Listen, I know it sounds like I'm sucking up to you, but like
No, please do.
nobody hustles better than you, and I really respect what you've done the last 3 years, and long may it continue.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I'm not saying the best is yet to come, but the hardest is yet to come because, you know, being on the Indies for 4 years, you know, I guess that first year doesn't count because, you know, the COVID stuff like that, but being released for 4 years is like, how do I keep top of myself? Like you said, and like I said, I got to keep chasing that buzz and, you know, and capitalizing on the buzz and creating new buzz. And it gets challenging. And the more and more I see people coming over from AEW or coming from WWE and it's competition, but I love the competition. You know, it just drives me and it fuels me even more. And it sucks for them, but it makes me more dangerous.